Welcome to Wildlife Outdoors with your host, Russell and Jose. If you have a passion for conservation of the outdoors, or you're enjoying a calming hike in the mountains, an exhilarating kayak trip on the river, feeling a fish on the end of your line, cooking on an open flame in a primitive campsite, or stalking big game, just waiting for the perfect shot, you're in the right place. So put on your boots and polarized sunglasses and come along for the ride.
Welcome back to another episode of Wildlife Outdoors. We got another exciting one for you today. We got first time thing where we're actually having somebody on back to back. So go ahead and welcome back Chance. Unfortunately, we talked to him before he went on this amazing turkey hunt. And so figured we'd bring him on again and have him tell his story and talk about my failed hunt and see if maybe I can learn a thing or two. So welcome back, Chance. How you doing?
Yeah, good, brother. Good. Thanks for having me back here. It's a pleasure.
Hey, of course, man. It's always fun talking to like-minded people, especially people that know a little bit more than me about things. So
I don't know if I'd go that far. I just think I maybe surround myself with good company.
Hey, that's not a bad idea either. So, man, tell us all about this hunt that you went on.
Yeah, man. So just got back from Missouri. First time hunting Easterns. So went up there, last week, midweek, and really had a lot of weather coming up through Arkansas. I was actually trying to fish my way up into Missouri. Got one good day on the water and then ended up, kind of just scrapping it and working from the computer. You know how that goes for a couple of days while I waited for it to dry out. So Wednesday I headed up to Missouri. Got up there, linked up with my buddy John Whittinghill. I don't know if you got a chance to meet him at Black Bear Bonanza, but big old mustache guy, works with the Armed Forces Initiative with Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Just a real salt of the earth dude. Invited me out to come hunt turkeys with him. So I've been blessed. I've luckily have gotten Merriam's, from Wyoming and in the Rio Grande here in Texas. So Eastern was pretty high on my list, trying to inch towards that Grand Slam. And so it was, without pressuring myself, I really wanted to make it happen on this hunt. So we got up there. The first day we went and, hunted some public land, kind of got there right at dark, basically went out and just, tried to owl-hoot at them, threw everything at them we could to see if we could get anything to pop off on the public land at night. Not a peep, man. And it was pretty windy, from those storms coming through. So I think that might've had something to do with that. But, so the next morning we just went out to that public land piece, kind of blind, looked at Onyx, obviously, like figuring out there was a creek bottom going through there, some pretty good roost trees. We said, let's venture down there and see how that goes. And, made it down, man, right before daylight, and, gobblers start going off, and there's hens like 25 yards in front of us in this roost tree that they're in.
Oh, wow.
We just, it was nuts, dude. So we just stop wherever we're in our tracks, literally, and just get next to the closest tree we could find that hide us. And we just kind of watched the show for a minute. John was doing a little bit of clucking and purring to him and had the gobbler fired up, but he was on the other side of the creek. So it was a hard sell. We kind of hung out there for about an hour and starting to think maybe this turkey, once he pitched down, he might come play with us. But right as we were, it was getting hot and heavy, two hunters just come bombing in there. And dude, it was hilarious because they had no clue we were there, and John and I just looked at each other and we both just started laughing because they came running up right underneath that roost tree that those hens were in, and the hens busted out of there and they're like, oh, and pointed to the sky. we should have whistled at them or something. We just watched the show for a minute, but I think there were some younger guys, which is, John and I were joking. It's kind of funny. I think, that'd be me 10 years ago, just running and gunning, not thinking about anything. So needless to say, we didn't want to get shot or, risk those guys being in any, danger. So we just let them have it and wandered off out of the woods. But, that's public land hunting, right?
Yeah. That's exactly how it is.
So then the next day we were pretty blessed to go out to John's family's got some land out there that they homesteaded on, way back in the day. And, really cool place, man. It's just that part of Missouri, central Missouri, is just really big open fields. And then you got a lot of like creek drainages with just hard stand timber. And so it's just for me, coming from the West, I was completely out of my element. I mean, the open fields portion, not so much, but just, those woods are so thick and just different tree varieties than I've ever been around. So I kind of just that first day just observed. And we went and sat down, had some gobblers that were out in the field, thought we were going to play ball, and they just gave us the slip, man. They went down to the river and went on their way, never saw them again. So that was, oh yeah. So that was pretty much day one. The second day, got up and I just kind of went for it, trying to find a goblin tree, and heard one gobbler probably 400 yards off in the distance. And so I just started picking drainages and kind of working my way through to get at least in the area where I thought the gobbles were coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And man, once they pitched out of the trees, they just went silent. There wasn't a peep to be had all day long.
Really?
Yeah. So we, and that's not uncommon. You hear, these guys talk about these turkeys kind of going on and off throughout the season when they get flocked up.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it really comes down to your ability to hen call on them at that point and entice them. And I got to admit, I'm still pretty much a rookie in that regard. So I wasn't doing any sexy talk.
Right.
So went back and had some lunch. And then the next, that afternoon I said, well, I'm just going to there was a pond up on top of this bald ravine. I said, I'm going to go up there and just kind of sneak into those trees and see if anything's out there strutting and sunning. Ended up having some gobblers blow out of there when I went walking up. So I knew they were definitely in that area, and mm-hmm. they were using that general vicinity of the property. And we were hunting about 600 acres. There's definitely plenty of birds all around,
Yeah.
The next morning, got up, went and sat by that pond, and I'm like, this feels good. Set my hen decoy out, and just, with them being all flocked up, I really didn't want to put a Jake in the mix, or, because he was running. The gobbler that I saw was running with 2 hens and 2 jakes. So he was pretty comfortable in his flock as it is.
Yeah.
About 9:30, man, it was awesome. This, fog starts rolling in off the river and just kind of like, a ship coming out of the fog. I just saw this big old tail come. And of course, it was 230 yards away from me at the other pond that's up there. So I gave a couple clucks and, did a little sequence and tried to get him to come over to me. And he showed some interest, but I think just being with that flock, he kind of just heard it off the side of the ravine and down into a drainage with them, and never saw him, on top of the hill again. So I did the next thing, that they try to cut him off at the pass is what I always like to call it. And so I ripped down the hill and did my best, scoot as I could down to the other end of the ravine to try to get in front of where I thought he was going, and just never saw him again. It's amazing how those birds, can just disappear in those woods like that. So at that point, we're going into day 3. I was getting a little discouraged because I only had 3.5 days to hunt, and I was like, man, we got to get after it tomorrow morning. So we stayed out till 8:00 that night, trying to pinpoint a roost tree, trying to figure out where these gobblers were. And I thought I heard 2 roosts, and I was like, okay, back in kind of the general vicinity I did on day 1 of hunting out there. Mm-hmm. So I said, I'm going to go set up on that leeward side of the hill where I saw him come up and, try to intercept his path. He obviously likes to go up on this hill and get into that drainage. So I kind of went over that by the other pond that had I been there the day before, I would have killed. It's a story as old as time.
Right.
So, didn't even see, I saw 2 hens. So
really,
yeah, man.
Yeah.
So it was just, another kick in the nuts. I was like, man, I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. Being a big game hunter from out west, you get pretty used to patterning animals and kind of figuring them out. And these turkeys, I was joking with John. I've always said, I think turkeys don't even know what turkeys are doing half the time.
It makes sense for sure if that's the case.
I could be wrong, like I said, but that was my feelings on it. But so that didn't pan out. Came back from lunch and the pressure was really on. Then I finally just there was a choke point at the bottom of the drainage in that general area where I'd known they'd been traveling back and forth. There was some pretty good sign. Mm-hmm. It had rained the night before. So, you could see some turkey tracks and some scratches and stuff like that. So I went and sat in a old, just brush pile up against an oak tree, dug myself in there as best I could, and did the old, those old timers. You kind of hear two iterations of turkey hunters. They always say like call sparingly and don't call, you just shut up. Or you got the guys that just, like Waddell, that can talk to him the whole time. So I went on the old school, just call a little bit and shut up streak. And so I'd set a timer on my phone to vibrate every 15 minutes, and I'd just give them a couple clucks and then just sit there. And I think I did that. It had to have been probably 3.5 hours. I was honestly starting to be like, man, I got to make a move. I haven't seen anything. And I leaned back in my chair that I was sitting in, and out of the corner of my eye, about 150 yards, I saw a bird, and I was like, oh shoot, it happened. they came. And it's funny how those turkeys will do that. They got them with their eyes being the way they are. They can see pretty much 360 with the way they move their head and everything. And their ears, are so in tune with what their eyes see. It's like they almost have a mental map where and I've always heard that, if a turkey will usually circle back to check something it heard, may not be right away. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what it went on. Just my persistence of that light cluck and sit there and wait. Eventually they just said, well, that sounds too good. We got to go check out and see what this hen's doing. So it was 2 gobblers, and they were feeding down, and I was like, man, it's going to happen. So I got everything ready, got my shotgun, made sure it was on my knee right, and just sat still. And that gobbler came in. He was about 45 yards. There was kind of a tree that was diagonal across my vision to him. And I'm not shitting you. When he got past that, he just stopped. And I don't know how, but he could see me. I mean, I was behind a bush, and somehow he just knew that something was there. Maybe because they use that drainage so much. But he turned. I mean, he immediately 180'd and started walking out of there. So I leaned forward in my chair, and I was shooting TSSs. So I was like, man, 45 yards, we can do this.
Yeah.
And I shot, and he hit down. So I'm like, oh, nice. But it couldn't have been a real great shot at that distance and kind of offhand. So I stood up real quick. The other turkey busts. He starts flying, and it's funny because I had my shot cam on, and I went and reviewed that footage, and that other turkey flew in front of me maybe 10 yards. And
really?
As much as I duck on, I probably could have wing shot it. But my mind at that time, dude, didn't even register other than my peripherals that turkey flew in front of me. It's crazy how you just get so pinpointed on one thing.
Right.
So anyways, I got up, and he was scooting away from me, and it blew my mind. So he had to been about 55 at that time, 60. So I sent another one at him, and he stumbles. And then I'm like, okay, he's got to go down. He's dying here. No, he takes to the wing. Starts flying off. Yeah, dude. Starts flying off. And so I, at this point, God, he's got to be 70 yards. I mean, so I shoot again. I put it like 4 inches over his back. I'm shooting a Benelli, so I'm like, this spread, have you got an extended range choke in, but it's got to be, a 10-foot spread at that distance. Right. So I just kind of put it 4 inches above his back as he was flying and pulled the trigger, and he glided and went out of my eyesight, kind of back towards that drainage, the hillside. And I was like, oh no. So I reload my gun and go running down there, and, I don't see him anywhere. And I'm like, God, I just lost this bird. It's, your worst feeling, the range of emotions. So I knew I had that shot cam on, and I said, all right, well, let me go back. I'm going to hop on my phone real quick and look at this footage and see exactly what went down. So my shot cam, it didn't register the first shot for some reason. It caught it like mid reload. But the second shot, I can clearly see him get hit, and he's running away from me, So he stumbles, and then he gets up on the wing on the third shot, and I saw where he drifted off to. So I called John, and I said, hey man, if you don't mind, come down here. Second set of eyes always helps. This is where I last saw him. So we searched through all the brush and briars and everything. And, maybe he's like a pheasant and dug in there somewhere, and he's just dying. Didn't find him. So I'm just getting pretty defeated at this point. And, we start walking this hillside. It was probably a 60 yard hill. We just start combing up and down it. And John, he found him in this brush pile, just, probably 40 yards up the hill. He must have just, glided over there and just ended up in that brush. But yeah, man, it was pretty crazy. The range of emotions I felt that day, you know. But at the end of it, we ended up getting that turkey out of there, and it was absolutely awesome to get a really nice tom. I think we scaled him at 23 pounds, so he was, he was a big old bird. Yeah. And man, when I kind of did a little necropsy on him afterwards, and those TSS rounds, like I definitely hit him. So his left leg, his thigh bone was broken half.
Oh wow!
So I think that happened on the second shot.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of them pellets must have just absolutely whacked it, because that's why he probably stopped running and took to the wing.
Yeah.
But his back, he was littered with shot all up and down his back from when he was running away from me.
Mm-hmm.
But it just, I think, that's why they talk about those, the neck and the head being so important on the turkeys, because they can eat shot. I mean, his feathers on a few of them literally wrap. I'm sure like you've seen on a duck or something, or a goose, how that feather will grab a pellet and just almost like stop it, right? Just barely subsurface.
Mm-hmm.
He had probably 5 or 6 of those, just where, I pulled the pellet out wrapped in feather, and he was just carrying those rounds. Yeah. So
that's insane.
Yeah, man. So the distance coupled with, just his perseverance to survive, it definitely changed some things. And it was a crazy hunt, to say the least.
Damn, it sounds like it. That's crazy.
Yeah,
that's there's just something about wounding an animal and not knowing if you're going to be able to retrieve it that is just that's like the low. And then to find it, but have to work to find it. I can't even imagine the roller coaster of emotions you're going through at that point.
Yeah, dude, I mean, I've lost some ducks back in the day, and we've got a pretty good duck dog, so 90% of them get found. But even then, I just hate losing animals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not very, I was telling John, and I tell anybody, I said, turkey hunting, you think you're a good hunter until you go out in the woods. And it is the most humbling thing I've ever done, because, nothing I grew up doing in Wyoming could have ever trained me for like hunting turkeys in the South.
Right.
Dude,
right.
I saw a quote recently. It was like, if a turkey could smell as good as a deer can, they would never get killed. Just because they're so like weary, their vision, like you were saying, their hearing is so incredible. It's insane. They're crazy little critters, man.
Well,
wow. They are.
You think about something that spends, its entire life, the majority of it on the ground, with everything wanting to kill it. It makes sense why they're pretty good at evading things. So
that does make sense.
But yeah, man, that was Missouri turkey, man. It was a redemption, because earlier in the season I actually missed a Jake down here in Texas, which shouldn't have happened at all. I just got pretty bad. So getting the Gobbler was definitely redemption, and a good way for me to wrap up my turkey season. So
right, dude, that's freaking
congrats,
awesome,
man.
Yeah, congratulations. This is a pretty bird, and if you're okay with it, I'll put a picture as you're describing the bird. I'll put a picture of it up there on the screen so listeners can see it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Feel free. Now I just I got one more to get. I need to get my Osceola, and I'd like to get a Gould's too. But
yeah.
Was
dude, you should go and get oscillated down in South America.
Oh yeah, those things are crazy.
Yeah. What were you asking, Jose?
Sorry, was this your first time chasing Easterns?
It is, yeah, very first time chasing Easterns, and I think it's pretty true what people say about, at least from my experience. They the Merriams were pretty easy to hunt, and that could have just been where I was hunting in Wyoming, agricultural type stuff. And then the Rios, I've had pretty good luck with them. We got on a really nice Rio this earlier this spring with my buddy Preston. It was kind of funny. He took that bird. I was videotaping, and from my perspective, it looked like I was right in front of him. One of those hunts, and I'm like, what is he doing? Shoot that. So these Easterns, man, literally it was, you had to get them to slip up, and they were not coming in on a string. I think the week before that, John was saying his cousin and him were hunting, and they were playing all the games. They were gobbling, they were coming in and fighting the decoys, and man, they just turned off. It's crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a lot that the Rios don't seem to be as weary as the Easterns, and that the Merriams are the same way. And I was talking to a lot of guys here, because I have friends that archery hunt turkeys down in Texas, and I was thinking, I'm going to do the same thing here. And then I have a buddy, shout out to Bradley, he's the one that came on my trip. He came down from Iowa, and he wanted to archery hunt turkey. And so I started talking to a few hunters around here that hunt the Easterns quite often, especially in the mountains and stuff. And I was talking to them about it. They're like, good luck. was like, what do you mean? They're like, I've bow hunted turkeys numerous times and I've never had an opportunity. They're like, I sit in pop-up blinds or I'll be in a climbing stand and the second that I try to draw, like they're gone. And I had one guy tell me, he's like, dude, I've been busted by a turkey just from turning my safety off. He said, they are extremely weary. I said, well, probably going to go shotgun then. And I have 2 shotguns. And so Bradley came down and we ended up going with shotgun, but it was a tough hunt. And I'll get to that in a little bit. I got some questions about your hunt, but yeah, dude, I've heard the Easterns are a little bit more tough than the Rios and Merriams. So
yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, my good friend Sterling and Kyle Wass, he actually just got his Grand Slam this year, finished up in Alabama with an Eastern. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man. And Sterling, he'd been hunting, and he's much better turkey hunter than I am. He's been hunting, pretty much his whole life, and for him, and he just had this old Tom down there in Alabama that same deal. Wasn't he'd see his head, and he was saying he'd literally see that head pop around a little oak tree just enough to see him, and then he'd just pull back. And
that's crazy.
And that's, I mean, I'll tell you right now, those Easterns, they've got my vote on the hardest turkey to kill. I haven't obviously done the other ones yet, but I still need to.
Well, I'm glad to know that I'm not being outsmarted by a dumb bird. I mean, it might be a dumb bird, but at least they're the smarter of the dumb birds. But yeah, so you're talking a lot about walking through drainages and stuff, and so I'm not a turkey hunter. This is the first season that I've ever really tried to hunt turkeys. So I did a lot of YouTube research and reading articles and stuff. And I didn't really see too much about how traveling to try to find turkeys, or really much on scouting turkeys. A lot of the stuff that I found was on how to call turkeys and how to hunt turkeys in general. So is walking drainages like a common thing? Is that the best way to get around in the woods?
Well, I think there's definitely, it depends on your situation, right? So like anything, those turkeys they see at 60 yards what we can see at 20 yards.
Oh, wow.
So you've always got to keep in mind that, you might have a 700-yard field or maybe 1,000-yard field in front of you. They can see you. You stick yourself out there out of cover, they're going to know. So always, like hunting any animal, you've got to play your topography. With turkeys, that's where that insight of being able to call them. And the interesting thing about calling turkeys, right? If you think about it from what it is, you're actually reversing biology. So a turkey, gobbles, and the hens usually come to them and flock up, and then the dominant tom, pretty much the pecking order controls that flock.
Right.
You've got in turn get him to think, okay, man, what is going on here? I've got to go to that hen. So like you're already kind of fighting that since you're reversing biology. And then when they're not playing that game, I mean, it just comes down to, man, they kind of call that style of turkey hunting bushwhacking at that point in time. And there's a lot of guys that have success, of cutting them off at the pass and getting in front of a turkey, playing topography, playing those drainages. You just got to, be really purposeful about how you're walking through the woods and stuff, just because of how alert, they are. I mean, one slip up and you may not even see them and they'll be gone. So
I see. Well, that makes a lot of sense because we're walking ridges, and my thought on that was a lot of what I was reading is that they like to roost and they like to hang out more on the top 1/3 of a ridge.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, well, if I'm walking below them, they're going to see me. And so I was thinking, okay, well, we'll take ridges. It's a little bit easier to be more quiet on the ridges because there's less, stuff on the ground and stuff like that. So we walked ridges the entire time, and that might be why we didn't have luck.
especially if there's open areas, man. If those turkeys they could be right on the side of in like, an open little meadow or something or whatever you're hunting. And if they can see it on, skyline or on that topography, any sort of movement is what they pick up on, and they're very good at noticing movement, and they immediately zero in on it and will spook based on that.
Okay.
So yeah, in that situation, it's hard to say without being where you're at, but I've always said, and it's like hunting anything's like hunting antelope with a bow, and I haven't even got one of those yet because it's so difficult.
Right.
I don't like to sit over water holes, so like. Same deal there. You've got to use those little ravines and crevasses to get down into and hide yourself from being skylined and be able to cut the distance between yourself and the antelope. Same thing with turkey, right? Like if you can figure out where they're going and they're going on a purpose, I mean, if you can get in front of them and set yourself up for success to have them intersect your path, maybe then you'll be able to take a call shy turkey or one that's really kind of flocked up and get him to commit that extra 70 yards, but when you're trying to cross, 300 yards of a field, that's that's a harder sell. But yeah, that's that's pretty much the way I look at it. Is you've just got to play those, play the topography to your advantage, do what you can to try to make a turkey slip up, and sometimes it works. I mean, but I'm obviously not a professor of turkeyology by any means. So
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely makes sense because I didn't know that their eyesight was that good that they could see at 60 what we could see at 20. That definitely makes a lot more sense with us walking ridge tops and definitely not having any luck. And when we got there first thing in the morning on the second day of the hunt, which I'll get to in a little bit, we got there early enough, and I also read that they don't ever like to rise for a hen, that they like to go into the valley for a hen. So we did find some spots between a couple ridges because we didn't know where the roosts were. Sure. So we tried to play the topography to our advantage at that instance, but majority of the other trip we just didn't know. And then to our credit, the first time we went out to go hunt, which neither of us are turkey hunters, so we're just kind of winging it. We're hunting a 13,000 acre tract in national forest in the Ouachita Mountains. So that's tough on its own, and so we knew we're biting off more than we could chew going into it, but we were hopeful. And so yeah, it was definitely difficult to say the least.
Well, that's those things, when you're hunting that big of a spread and you don't have the time, nor and where I was lucky was the place I was hunting had a lot of open areas where I could get visual eyes on turkeys and kind of see what they were doing throughout the day.
Right.
And a lot of that was from me blowing them up, stumbling upon them like, oh God, okay, they're here at this time. And I was dropping Onyx pin, and they were here at this time, dropping Onyx pin, and just kind of patterned them that way. I know that a lot of those guys in Arkansas and other places, especially like Alabama, you get into those real deep, brushy, you can't see anything areas. You've got to be able to get them located first light, and then you got to cut that distance, as best you can before they pitch down. And that's going to be your hope at that point in time of getting them to work your way. I mean, and then there's that fine dance too, right? Like you can't, you'll get 50 yards in between next to the roost tree. Well, you're probably too close at that point in time. So finding that sweet spot it's difficult. And I know I was talking to John, and he said he felt like he sucked at turkey hunting until one day he just turned on. He's like, man, I'm a turkey hunter now, I'm still waiting for that realization.
I am too, man. Well, that's good to know that, we're not alone in that. And patterning in them on a larger piece of property is definitely difficult. Now I'd like to tell you about a couple of our sponsors. First, we have Bucked Up. When you're out in the wild, whether you're stalking a trophy buck, casting for that elusive bass, or trekking through rugged terrain, you need more than just grit. You need fuel that matches your passion for the outdoors. That's where Bucked Up energy drinks and supplements come in. Crafted for those who live life on the edge, Bucked Up offers a range of products designed to enhance your performance, endurance, and recovery. From the early morning hunts to the late night fishing trips, Bucked Up has your back. Use promo code WLO20 at checkout to receive 20% off your order. Explore their full range of products by clicking on the link in the description. Next, we have Foretold Coffee Company. Start your adventure with a brew as bold as the journey ahead. Foretold Coffee Company crafts ethically sourced small batch roasts for those who find peace in the wild. Founded by Army veteran Joshua Sandoval, each cup reflects resilience, exploration, and the spirit of the outdoors. Whether it's the light Peruvian cocoa, the medium El Salvadoran bourbon, or the dark Mexican honey, each cup is perfect for the base camp mornings or fireside evenings. Subscribe to their monthly coffee club for 10% off and stay fueled for every expedition. To learn more, visit foretoldcoffeeco.com. So my buddy Bradley came down from Iowa, and we're like, man, we're going to go kayak to an island on Lake Ouachita. Then we're going to kayak to the mainland and go hunt the national forest. And, there's high hopes. We know it's going to be crazy. And so we load everything up. He gets in on Friday midday. So right when he gets here, we go and I go to my storage unit, load up the kayaks, load up the camping stuff, and went and got some supplies from the store and headed out. And so we go in from the north end of Lake Ouachita, and we kayak, I'd say probably 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles out to an island. And we're working our way around, and we decided what island we wanted to camp on. So we get there. We set up our tents, and we just kind of start scouting around on X, trying to find out where we're going to go hunt in the morning and stuff like that. And I didn't really think too much into the logistics of it all. But we hung out, and we're just kind of hanging around that night. And we camped. We woke up early. I set my alarm for like 5 or something like that. And I was like, I want to get to the mainland before sunrise, 15, 20 minutes before sunrise. And we wake up, and there's bass boats just hauling ass all over the lake. And I'm like, damn, I didn't think about that. I'm not trying to kayak across this lake in the dark with bass boats hauling ass. And I was like, well, I guess we're waiting to go until the sun comes up. And so that was the first mistake. And so we waited till the sun come up, and then we kayaked probably about a mile to the mainland. And, you know, I'm just trying to locate birds at this point. And I was like, well, it's a little bit late to be, you know, just trying to locate them, but we'll still try anyways. And so we're kind of kayaking around the bank, and I'm just throwing out some owl hoots and stuff like that. And couldn't locate any birds, didn't hear anything. And I said, well, let's look at OnX and see if we can find some ridges and follow some valleys and see where we can end up. And so we pull up on this peninsula, and ironically enough, on top of like the highest ridge in that area near that peninsula was like had a little mountain icon, and it said Gobbler's Hill. And I was like, well, hopefully that's a good sign, right? Because it had 13,000 acres. And I'm like, well, we're pretty close to Gobbler's Hill. Hopefully that's good. And so we park the kayaks and we get out and we get everything all ready and start hiking into the woods. And we get maybe a mile in, and we're heading kind of off the peninsula into like the main forest. And the lake was probably about 6 to 8 foot higher than it normally is. And so we get there and we start walking down into this valley, and we're like, crap, is that water? And then I pull out my map, and on the OnX map, like, there's no water. It's a peninsula. But then we get there and it's like waist deep water. And I'm like, damn. So we hiked all the way back out to the kayaks to go and kayak further into the, you know, to get past that, not have to hike through the waist high water. And then so we hike in probably maybe another mile, maybe a little bit more than that. And I found a good spot where there's like 3 different ridges that all come together in one lowland area. And it had been raining and stuff a couple of days before, and saw some sign. And I was like, all right, yeah, this is going to be a good spot. And so we post up on 2 different trees, and it's a little bit more open than now I realize that it should have been. But there was some cover around us. And so we're sitting there, and, you know, we have everything covered up, and we're, you know, calling sparingly, kind of similar to you. It's like, I don't want to scare them off too much. I've heard that, you know, if they're not returning a lot of gobbles, that you got to be patient with them, and they'll circle back around and try to see what's going on. And so we're sitting there, and it's maybe an hour, 2 hours in, maybe an hour and a half in. And we just hear 2 hunters coming through similar to y'all, and they're just going crazy with it. And we're like, damn, like, they were probably, you know, new to hunting just like we were, and they probably, you know, heard the other aspect of it. It's like, sometimes you just got to annoy them and see what you can hear. And so I was like, man, I don't want to hunt around this. And they kept coming closer to us. So then I started doing a couple owl hoots to kind of like notify them, like, hey, we're here. And they just kept coming closer. So we got up and we hiked a couple miles further in, found another spot. Didn't see any sign, but it looked like a good area. There was some like thick briars, and then there was some hardwoods. There was a creek bed. There was 2 ridges. We were in a valley on the side of 2 different ridges. And I was like, this seems like what I would think would be a good spot. And so we got right on the edge of those thick briars, and, you know, posted up next to some trees, dug ourselves down, and waited there for a good while. And we were there about 2 hours, and just sparingly calling, and just nothing, didn't hear anything. And I was like, well, we probably came in too late. Let's just head back, and we'll, you know, hang out the rest of the day, maybe come do an evening hunt. And we get back there and sitting around. I think we went swimming for a little bit, and, you know, we chopped down a few things, and we're looking at, you know, we found some dead wood. We're like, oh, we're going to try to make a fire or something. And we thought about it. We're like, dude, we're not going to be able to get out there before sunrise. And I was like, why don't we just pack everything up, go back to my house, and we'll go hunt the national forest closer to my house tomorrow morning. Mm-hmm. And he's like, all right, that sounds like a plan. So we decided to load everything up, and we put everything back in the kayaks, kayak all the way back, and get to the truck and go unload everything in the storage unit. And I brought 1 bag out of the truck to go inside. And I was like, all right, cool. Well, let's just go, and maybe we can scout, or maybe we can try to get an evening hunt in before the sun goes down. And then we'll just, maybe we can locate something, whatever the case may be. And he said, all right, cool. And so we're still on our hunting gear and everything. And we brought that 1 bag inside that had some clothes and stuff in it. Get out to the spot, start getting everything ready, and pull out the guns. And I was like, dude, where are the shells at? And he's like, I thought you had them. And I was like, damn. So we started tearing through all of our bags. I'm opening center consoles, looking under seat, cannot find 1 shell. And I'm like, damn, that sucks. I was like, well, guess we're just going to scout, you know? Mm-hmm. And at this point, we're probably maybe an hour and a half before sundown. And I was like, well, let's just hike in. And so we hike in, and we go, I mean, we're on a trail. We're on an old logging road in the national forest. And we get maybe an 1/8 of a mile in. And I just stop, and I was like, whoa, just real quick. Mm-hmm. And you just hear, and I'm like, damn it. And there's birds here, and ain't got no shells. And I was like, well, it's getting later on in the evening. So I was like, so maybe they roost in that area. So we'll come here at the ass crack of dawn, and we'll try to catch them on the roost. And so we're like, all right, let's get out before we spook anything. So we go and get in the truck, head back, we shower, go out to dinner, whatever else, get up early in the morning and head out there. And we get around that same spot. And at this point, it's probably about 20 minutes before sunrise. So I give another little quick hoot. I don't hear nothing. I'm like, all right, well, let's just hike in a little bit. And so we hiked in a little bit, and we stayed in the ravine on that time. And right when the sun started coming up, gave a couple clucks, nothing. And I was like, damn. So then we're like, maybe that's not where he was roosted. Maybe he spotted us. So we hiked out, and I found another good area. We hiked in maybe about a mile or so and found a spot that seemed really good. And now we're sitting there, and we lasted about 2 hours there, calling sparingly with nothing. And I was just like, man, dude, maybe there's just not here. And that part of the national forest that we were at kind of butted up to somebody's property. Mm-hmm. And then you can see on Onyx that there was a trail. And I was like, well, it's probably heavily pressured by whoever owns that property. I don't know if it was a hunting lease or where somebody lives. And I was like, well, maybe we'll go deeper into the woods. And so we did that. And that's when we started walking all the ridges and stuff. And we went, I think in total we hiked 8 miles that day. And there was times where I was like huffing and puffing. I was like, dude, probably 15-20% grade on some of these and going 200-300 foot in elevation. And so we're dog tired some of the way, but we found this real good spot, and we're on the backside of a ridge, and we heard a turkey a couple 100 yards off. And I was like, dude, we need to call sparingly and try to get him to come up over that ridge to where he can't see us, because we know he's on that side. If we're on the downside of this ridge, he might come up trying to come over the ridge, and that's what we'll get him. And so we called sparingly, and we heard him one time and didn't hear him again. I'm like, man, I've heard that these birds get curious. And I know that on my left side, there's some thick briars. Like, he's probably going to choose that way to come up. He's not going to come up from the clearing side. And so I'm watching over there, and everything I hear, every squirrel that I hear, or every crow that I hear flying off, every wing flap, I'm just like, it's turkey, and nothing. He never came. And at this point, I'm having to leave in a little bit to drive to Texas to go pick up my daughter in a couple hours. And I'm like, dude, I was like, if he's not coming to us, maybe we just go to him. And I was like, well, I've also heard of people just going crazy on calls. And so I was like, let's do that from this ridgetop and just see if we can hear anything. And then if not, then we'll start working our way back towards the truck and see. And that was the direction that the turkey had called previously. And so we're just going crazy. And he has my box call. My slate call wasn't working. It got wet somehow in the kayak trip. And it just, I don't know if I just need a Sand-Aid or if it's my striker, something's up with it. Yeah. And so I was just, using my mouth. And so he's over there with his box call, and I'm like, just with my mouth, just trying to make noise. And we heard one return, but it was far. And I was like, well, that's the way we have to go anyways. So we just kind of tried to ease our way. And every 15, 20 minutes or so, do a couple clucks on the box call, and didn't hear him again. And I was like, damn. So it was a tough hunt. We heard a couple gobbles the whole trip. Logistically didn't have stuff planned out properly. Probably shouldn't have camped on an island. Probably should have camped on the mainland. But yeah, it was just a tough hunt, but we learned a lot. And then now asking you questions, I see where I've had some failures. So season here ends on the 11th, and right now it's the 6th. So I got 5 days to try to get one.
There you go.
I'm hoping this weekend I might be able to get out again on Saturday and hopefully go get me one. But yeah, dude, it was a good trip. It was a great time. But it was definitely tough hunting.
Yeah, I think definitely, your best bet's always try to, pinpoint that roost tree. And
yeah,
even like what I found this last trip, with the weather, and I think that plays a lot into it. This last week was probably pretty difficult because of all the storms coming through the southeast.
Yeah.
And it just, the barometric pressure, I think all of that changes turkeys, and just like it does any other animal, right? Like right. It'll mess with elk, it'll mess with antelope, it does it to deer. So there's reason to believe you think turkeys would be the same way, but if you can find that roost tree and try to get within, 100, 150 yards of it in the morning, sneak in there in the dark, you'd have a pretty good shot. So that's always easiest, man. Get out there right before dark, when that sun's going down, and hoot at them and see. Because, that's the only way I was even able to tell where there were turkeys in the morning, was to get a little bit of a response in the evening. So
I see. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might head out to this spot again, and try to get some evening action, maybe even Friday night. And yeah, I don't know. Wish me luck, because I'm going to try this again. And me not being a hunter in general, it makes it difficult.
Well, sit till dark. If you get in a good area where you may have heard gobbles or before, kind of assess that train on X, figure out, they like to they'll roost in, like high spots. They like the elevation, makes them feel safe. If there's water, if there's, big high trees that have limbs hanging over water, they'll roost on those a lot of times just because it alleviates the amount of areas they have to worry about getting, a predator coming in from.
Right.
And try to find that gobble. And if you can pinpoint that, you should be, you've got, I'd like, probably 60% of the deal done. It's just, playing it right the next morning and then having the turkey do his 10-20%.
Right. That makes sense. So do they normally go back to the roost after sundown, or is it normally before sundown? Do you know?
They usually start walking, they'll start walking probably, I don't know, I'd probably guess that hour before. I think, well, let me think. So it was about 6:15 when I killed that gobbler.
Okay.
And I think he was starting to make his way down towards the river to go to roost. And so sunset was at 7:45, 7:50.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's, I think they start making their way probably that hour and a half before. They'll make their way to the roost tree. And then usually they'll pitch up there right before sunset or right at sunset. And then, it's I know it's very uncommon for turkeys to move roost trees in the middle of the night. So usually if you can get them pinpointed down, they're still going to be sitting there tomorrow morning. So.
Okay. So after work, I still might be able to get an evening hunt in, you think, with maybe not blowing them?
Yeah.
I think get out there around 5 o'clock.
I'd definitely just go out there and, if you happen to come across one, but I would go out there with the intentions of trying to find a roost tree. Really put your efforts into that, because I think that's going to pay you the best dividends the next morning.
Okay. That makes sense. Got something to think about.
If you're the first hunter in the woods, you've got the upper hand, right? Unless two guys come walking through your spray.
Right. And I don't have any decoys either. So I don't know much about decoys, but I know that I've heard a lot of people put a hen out there, and sometimes the toms will get real aggressive and come towards them, and that's how you decoy them in. But did you get yours using a decoy or no?
I didn't. So the one morning when I did have a hen decoy out, that, like I said, that turkey, he clearly saw it, and he was strutting his stuff, but he was already henned up with 2 other hens and 2 jakes. So, I mean, at that point in time, it just really wasn't doing it for him to, I think in his head, he was thinking, well, I've got 2 hens here and these 2 jakes I beat up on. Why would I go over there and get that one lone hen, let's let her come to me. But there's really 2 trains of thoughts on that. And I know that turkeys, I've always played the hen game because it's kind of neutral. You get some of these guys go out and you can fan them, and it really it's kind of like calling, right? You've got to play to the turkey's hand. If the turkeys are responding and they're being really talkative, you can call more. If they're really being quiet, you should probably call less. Same thing with the, decoys. You get them in the middle of, I guess, rut, for lack of better terms, God, they'll go over and just start whipping on a jake decoy or a gobbler decoy. They'll come ripping in there and challenging it. But then you get these gobblers too that, the jakes will actually turn on a gobbler. And so if they might get 3 or 4 jakes together and kind of go whip up on that old tom gobbler and kick him out of the flock. And so if you get a big old tom that just got his butt kicked by a jake and he sees a jake decoy, a lot of times he'll turn around and be like, you know what? I don't want to get in another fight today. I'm just going to go ahead and walk away the other way. So it's really just playing those cards. That's why I've always thought the hen decoy is probably the least invasive. But it also doesn't give you that as much of that reaction, when you get a tom's real fired up. So I think that's the best way to play it, is just, see what the birds are doing. If they're acting real ruddy, if they're acting like they want to come in and fight and they're gobbling their heads off, you probably have a pretty good chance of fanning. Obviously I wouldn't ever advise anybody fan on public land. That's a good way to get shot in the face.
Right.
But you can definitely play. I've killed like Jake, my Miriams that I killed, it was that situation where a Jake came in and started beating up on a Jake decoy. And then finally a Tom came in with him, and me and my buddy's wife, we doubled up on, turkeys off the decoys. And then in this instance where they were being real quiet, I just played the long game and tried to get in front of their path of travel and play it from there. So
awesome. Yeah, that'll probably be my best bet over here is trying to get ahead of them when they're trying to roost or when they're coming down. So well, I appreciate the tips on that, man.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. Try to play the terrain and try to, turkeys are just like us. They want to find an easy way to wherever they're going, and a lot of those terrain features are natural. You look at it with deer, you look at it with any animal. Drainages, creek bottoms, things like that. Those are just kind of natural highways of points that just draw animals into. Instead of having to go beat through 60 yards of brush up a hill,
Right.
they're going to follow that drainage just like we do. So if you can pick the right one out, there's a good chance you wait long enough, something's going to cross your path.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the tips, man. I'm definitely gonna put them to use and hopefully try to get me a bird. It'd be pretty cool if I can get one my first season hunting them.
Absolutely.
Especially in the Washita Mountains. It's a little rough up there sometimes.
But that's the good thing about turkey hunting, at least for me. Even though I was having hell those first 3 days, and I didn't think I was going to get a turkey at all, I was just ate up. It made me want to turkey hunt even more because I was just like, I gotta figure this out.
Right. Up for the challenge for sure. I'm eager to try to get out there and try to figure it out. And it's not like, fishing, sometimes it's just off, it's on, you can, just change a fly and sometimes that turns it on. But with turkey hunting, it's not really so much you can change. It's whether they're off, whether they're on, and if you screw up or not. So, yep. So Jose, you said you've been on a turkey hunt previously.
Cool. Many moons ago.
Have you been doing any research and ready to get out one of these next seasons or
No, man, I haven't. I would like to, man. I think the one time I went, I was invited to a ranch out in the hill country by a friend of mine. We had gone deer hunting before on that place, and it was great. And we'd see some turkeys. And it's kind of funny, like when it's not hunting season, it's just that they're kind of like whatever. Like they don't really pay you that much mind. It seems like, but it's I don't even know. It's like a clock ticks on. They're like, nah, we're not having it. And dude, I remember one time we were out there in the morning, didn't see a thing, didn't hear a thing. And so we went to have breakfast at the little cabin that they have, and they have this big window. And so we're sitting at the table, we're just looking out. We see these two turkeys just kind of hanging out by the gate. We're like, holy shit, dude! Maybe we can like grab our guns, sneak out the back real quick, and there's some distance between us and them, but like maybe we can use some of the trees and we'll kind of block our way. We can kind of get close to them, dude. We opened the back gate, we turn around and we just we just see them hauling down the road like they were gone, man, like fast. And it's just seeing a turkey run is the funniest freaking thing, dude. They got some wheels on them when they want to, but
yeah.
but dude, man, like they were just out of it. They were just gone. We had no chance. So we just put the guns back down, finished breakfast, and we went back out in the afternoon. And with my buddy Todd, he was on the gun first, and I was using a little slate call, and so I had hit a couple calls. Couldn't even tell you what I've been doing before or what kind of calls they were. I don't even remember. And I know that I was practicing these calls in my dorm room in college at the time. So my roommate was probably getting ready to freaking hang me, but I was probably not the biggest fan, but I wanted to try and get it down at least a little bit before we went out and hit the slate call a couple times, and we heard some gobbles. And there was this one in particular. He had been pretty responsive, and all of a sudden he just goes silent. And so I kind of laid off the call for a little bit, and I started just hitting it like a little, like every so often here and there. It's nothing. Didn't hear a thing. And then finally hit it one more time, and he responded, but it was super close, dude. Like it was loud. I remember looking over at my buddy Todd. His eyes were like saucers, dude. They're huge. And I could see him just mouth. He's like, "Holy," And we're pretty pumped, man, and we felt pretty good about where we were and our setup. We thought we were gonna get a shot at it, and then this truck comes down the road. I guess just close enough, man, and messed it up, man. Never got to see the bird. Never heard it again either. And that was the last afternoon. So that was it. But after that, dude, I was pretty hooked on it, man. It's just opportunities for me, right? It's just they're pretty limited. I know Parks and Wildlife has some drawings I believe I put in for some in the past, with no luck. So I think I'm going to try and start putting in some more this coming season. I believe this should be opening draw for drawings here pretty soon, if I'm not mistaken. So who knows, man? I'd love to get back out there and chase turkeys. I thought it was super fun. I think they're really cool critters. I've seen them in like just on the ranch when we go do research. Like, I mean, they're everywhere, right? But I've never aside. But when I'm actually like hunting them, I've never seen one. So
Yeah,
it'd be cool to scratch that one off the bucket list. And a lot of people who I talk to who've turkey hunted, they're like, man, it's they really like it. They get ate up by it pretty good, just because it's. I mean, I guess it almost combines duck hunting with deer hunting. You know, at duck hunting, like you can hit the call and you can get them to respond and get them come in. And I mean, I guess you can do that with deer too, like with grunts and the antlers and stuff, but rattle them in. But yeah, it's kind of cool in that way. But yeah, I'd like to give it a shot. Maybe next year. We'll see. I doubt I'm gonna get out to. I think actually turkey season ended here anyway, so it wouldn't even matter. But
that's what I think. That's why I love, bird hunting so much in general, and the camp, the whole vibe that goes into it. There's a lot of camaraderie and getting to spend time with your friends. And I know that's like the cliche thing every hunter says, but it's true, man. Like just the time spent in a field with your buddies and the conversations had around a campfire. I mean, even if I wouldn't have got a turkey, it was worth it just to get out there and have that unique experience. Just like, you waking up and realizing you should have kayaked the day before or whatever, it's like, it's those things that you'll remember forever, So
exactly. Yeah,
Leaving
keep my
shells.
island camping and turkey hunting separate.
Yeah, leaving your shotgun shells, man.
Yeah, dude, we probably would have killed a bird that night too.
I was joking. We had a group text, and our buddy Cinco, he texted. He said, "Hey, you guys are bringing shotguns, right?" And I said, "Wait, shotguns? I thought this was a slingshot only hunt." Maybe bring your slingshot with you. And
dude, that would be an insane hunt to try to hunt a turkey with a slingshot.
That's some Tim Wells level stuff right there, man.
Right.
This Lockmaster.
That would be insane.
Dude, there was one time we were.
So you also did.
Go
ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say this is not even turkey hunting related, but just the stories reminded me of this one. This one time, me and my buddy were duck hunting out. Well, me and some buddies were duck hunting out on the coast in Texas, and the birds were just going everywhere, man. And everyone's just kind of shooting. And I remember I had already shot my 2 redheads, and those were the only things flying. So I had my gun down, and I was just kind of watching. And from the corner of my eye, I see my buddy, like, he had just unloaded his shotgun, and he blindly reaches into his bag and grabs shells. He starts pumping them into the mag, and I just see him rack one. I just hear boom, and he looks at me, and we like make eye contact. He goes, "Dude, I think that was a slug." This guy, I don't know. I mean, you're not even supposed to have like any lead out in the flats, right?
It's a good thing you got it, 'cause
Right.
game.
Yeah, dude. I was like, dude, what the hell?
that would be a surprise.
Why do you have that? He goes, just in case you see some hogs, man. I was like, Jesus Christ, bro.
Damn
I mean,
it.
in his defense, like I've got so many darn loose shotgun shells around here. Every duck season, I've got to go around and be like, yes. Yeah, yes. I should really start putting those in their individual boxes, not just taking the pockets out.
Yeah.
Just get some ammo boxes and just have a place to throw them.
My next goal, man, is John hooked me. Ever seen one of these? It's a wingbone call. Yeah, John made me this, and yeah, it's a turkey wingbone.
That's pretty
So
cool.
it's
dude.
yeah, dude, you make a call with it. So I'm obviously not very good, but it's pretty cool. You can.
No
So you-
way.
That's pretty
dude.
cool.
Calling turkeys with their own bones. So that's like, I mean, that's some Ozark stuff right there. That's my next goal.
I want to say that I've heard somebody talk about that on a podcast. I don't know if it was the Ozark podcast or if it was there was this old timer. I don't remember what the podcast was called that I was, doing my research and stuff on. There was this old timer that was telling all sorts of stuff of turkeys and the history and how they hunted them as Native Americans and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I heard them talk about something like that, but I've never seen one. That's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool, man. It was an awesome gift, and I'm looking forward to getting out there. I'm going to be driving around next time I go to Wyoming for 16 hours practicing. I do on my
Dude, that's awesome.
in the truck, because if the wife's in the truck, she'll just probably kill me. So,
Right. Yeah, I hopefully I can get a turkey and maybe I can learn how to make one of those. That'd be pretty cool.
yeah,
That'd be
man.
pretty
That's my
sweet.
goal. I'm gonna try to make a couple out of my Tom that I just got, and luckily I've got 2 wings in case I mess up.
There you go.
Dude, that's freaking awesome. Well, man, I appreciate you hopping on last minute like this, and it was a good episode. And I appreciate all the tips, and hopefully they'll help me get on a bird here in the coming week or so.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I'll be watching your stories, and hopefully I can see you dragging a big old Tom out of the woods.
Yeah, I sure hope so. I appreciate it, man. And for those of y'all watching, thank you for watching to the end, and we'll catch y'all next time.
This has been Wildlife Outdoors. Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook at Wildlife Outdoors and on Instagram at wild.life.outdoors. Let's go live life on the wild side.